Hi, welcome to the second part of Active Directory Certificate Services Exploitation series. Here in this video, we'll look into ESC2 privilege escalation that exploits AnyPurpose template. If you need an overview of how ADCS works, you can go back to watch my first video of this series, where I explain how templates works, what EKU is, and the overall certificate lifecycle. Here we'll focus on ESC2 escalation and how we can fix the problem once we found it, so we could provide value to our clients during pen test or team engagement. So I'll already create a vulnerable template, vulnerable2. Here I'll show you. That's what it looks like, vulnerable2, and it has AnyPurpose EKU. So we'll analyze this later. But for now, let's look into the description. So here I'm on Certipy GitHub page. And we can go to privilege escalation. We jump to ESC2, AnyPurpose certificate. So here if we read up on this, basically says if the certificate has AnyPurpose EKU, it can be used. Certificate from that template can be used to request another certificate for a different user, potentially the main administrator. And this is basically what we're going to do, and there's some quirks I'll go over, which I'll show you. So first, let's just run our find command to see if we have vulnerable templates. Certify find dash vulnerable to find vulnerable templates. We'll do standard out to make sure it just prints out the output, and we'll supply our username, password, and domain controller IP. So let's hit enter. And here we can see it. So it's vulnerable to EC2. If we go to checks, so basically our user needs to have an element permissions. In our case, domain user is set to have an element rights, which is every authenticated domain user, which is very bad. Second check is template can be used for any purpose. And we can see extend key usage, any purpose, which is good. And I think that's pretty much all we need. And an element agent set it to, but it's always to any purpose. So that doesn't really matter. All right, let's go ahead and exploit it as our normal user. We don't have any privileges right now, just a regular user. I can show you right here. If we go to users and computers, so our user Parker, member, just a member of the main users, no extra privileges, nothing. All right, so first up first, we can go back to the wiki again. So first we need to use a vulnerable template that's set to any purpose to request a certificate for our user. So let's do that. Here we specify REC, which stands for request certificate, our username, password, domain controller IP, our target, which is going to be our ADCS server that hosts the certificate services, and our CA name, which is batman.ca. You could get all that information from the find command that we ran before. And we need to specify a vulnerable template. So hit enter, and we get a certificate for P Parker. Now, because the template is set to any purpose, as we read in the article, we can use that certificate to request certificate for another user, for example, the main administrator. So let's try that. So these are going to be the same arguments, but for the template name, we'll specify user template. Then you need to specify our certificate that we just got, which is parker.pfx. And we want to specify the user we want to request the certificate on behalf of. In our case, it's going to be Marvel administrator. So we'll request certificate for administrator user. Let's go ahead and do that. And here we go. We got a certificate for administrator user. But now here comes the trick. When I use it, as per wiki, after we get the certificate, we can use it to authenticate and we'll get the hash for admin user. But this is not really the case in every environment, and I'm just gonna explain why in a second. So let's try to use the certificate that we just got. There's debug flag for a second. So here specify our certificate, which is supposed to give us our NT hash for administrator user and our DCIP. Hit enter, and it fails. And we get this error KC error P data type not supported. KC has no support for P data type. After doing some Googling, you can see I found this GitHub issue. Basically, user encountered the same problem, and we can see it says either the main control does support PKI authentication, which is Kerberos with a certificate, or DC doesn't have an installed certificate from your ADCS component. The latter one is not the case because our DC has a certificate for sure, but by default, the main controller template that DC requests, it doesn't have Kerberos authentication with a certificate enabled, so it doesn't allow for Kerberos authentication EKU. It's not supported by default. So if it's not set, you'll get this error, but we can fix it. So I create a custom template, Kerberos authentication, which supports this KDC authentication, which is basically Kerberos. So if we go to our DC and need to open MFC, and we need to request certificate that supports Kerberos authentication. And this is only for domains that don't support it, this required. So we would need to request it for it to work. But if you find yourself in an environment that doesn't have Kerberos authentication enabled in certificate, you can still abuse this technique. All you have to do is specify LDAP shell. And because you authenticate against LDAP, the Kerberos there's no Kerberos authentication. It just verifies that the user is valid. So if you specify LDAP shell, it drops you into an LDAP shell, and you can abuse other attacks such as RBCD and other things. So that's how you can go around it if the main controller doesn't support Kerberos authentication and certificates. But if it does, here's how you fix it. So basically, I need to request a certificate using the Kerberos authentication template. Let's click on all, succeeded. And here if we go to information, it has KDC authentication, which means it's gonna support Kerberos authentication using certificates. And if we go back and try this one more time without LDAP shell, boom, we get an empty hash and we get an admin user. Here's how we escalate from regular user to an administrator, and we can try it with netexec. Specify the hash. And we can see pwned everywhere because this the main admin, it has local admin everywhere. Alright, here's how you exploit ESC2 and escalate privileges. But now let's take a look at the template and see how we can fix it. So here's our vulnerable to template. So first thing first is AnyPurpose EKU is very dangerous and you should never set it. So ideally you want to remove it and set specific EKUs. But if it's not possible and for some reason you got some legacy application or a black box application that you cannot get to work with any other EKUs but this one, you would need to go to security and at least remove all domain users from being able to enroll. And create a specific security group that can enroll into this template that contains only that user. But ideally, yeah, you would want to remove AnyPurpose EKU. Remove this and add specific ones that we need. For example, client authentication or code sign. You get the idea. So that's it for now, and thank you for watching. And I'll see you in the next series. We'll look into ESC3 or in other videos. Thank you, and see you in the next one. Bye.